Good morning, everybody. We are excited to be at the day one of Agile Network India May 2021 events. And let's begin with our first event of the day by Pune chapter on risk management in VUCA world, where we have Ashwini Singh, who is principal consultant and at Innovation Infosys Technologies as speaker. And we have Prashant Gulwadi, who is going to facilitate this session. So I invite both of you for this session. Over to you, Ashwini and Prashant.
Thank you, Nupur.
Good morning,
Uh,
Prashant. Good morning, Nupur.
yeah,
Good
hi.
morning, everyone.
Good to see you again. So, thank you everyone for joining on a Saturday morning. Before we start the session, we'd like to thank Agile Network India and the sponsors Innovation Roots as well as TCS Jai. Our topic for the day is risk management in a VUCA world, and we'll have the session from 10 o'clock to 10:50. For the first 35 minutes or so, we'll have a presentation, structured presentation by a speaker. Meanwhile, you could add your questions in the chat session. At the end of the session, we'll have a Q&A session as per the time limit. So let me start with a brief background of what we're talking about. What is the risk? What is risk management? Most of us would be familiar with these terms all over these various walks of life. Now we are hearing this word called VUCA. What is the VUCA world? I'll let Ashwini expand on that as part of the slide, otherwise I take his thunder away. I'm sure we'd all be interested to know the details about managing the risk in the VUCA world today. What are the practices, challenges, and outcomes that you'd like to share with us? So we have with us today an eminent senior from the IT industry. Ashwini Singh is a digital transformation leader having rich experience in strategic consulting and driving large-scale agile and DevOps-driven digital transformations for global financial services companies across the globe. For the past 20 years, he's got a very string of pearls type of career trajectory, I can say. He has worked with T-Systems, IBM, Capgemini, Cognizant in the past, and now working with Infosys. All of those, I would say, something we like to get associated with. He has created various white papers and has been active participant speaker in various thought leadership events. I thank Ashwini for supporting our knowledge sharing initiative through this participation in today's session. So welcoming Ashwini, the session is yours. Thank you, Ashwini.
Thank you, Prashant, for the warm welcome and introduction. Hopefully, my screen is visible to everyone and I'm audible enough for everyone. So we have already covered the introduction part. Again, thanks to you, Prashant. I'll get going from here. Good morning, everyone, again for joining this session. So as Prashant mentioned, let me start with the understanding the session objectives here. We'll try to understand what is the VUCA world and what are the challenges organizations are facing, a brief overview of that. We'll try to understand what are those traditional risk management practices which have been in play for quite a while now, and why they seems to be a little bit inadequate in the current world, the VUCA world. And then we'll also get into experience sharing and understanding on some of the risk management techniques we have seen working well for the organizations operating well in VUCA world. Yeah, and then we'll try to touch base on the culture part. What does it mean to be a risk overcomer and not just a risk survivor? Then, last but not the least, we're gonna have some experience sharing where these all new techniques we're gonna relate to an experience with a big financial organization. How many of those new age techniques of risk management have been applied effectively in that organization? Yeah. So with this session objectives at play, let me get started with how risk management has been traditionally done. So I'm sure most of you, many of you would have already experienced that in past. The traditional risk management approaches have been closely tied up to something called as the project management practices. And we know that for project management practices, Project Management Institute PMI used to have something called as a project management body of knowledge, PMBOK in short, and that has been the centerpiece of you know uh, entire details about what practices you follow as a project manager, program manager, and that has been single point of reference for most of the project management being done globally across different types of organizations. So a part of project management practices, because risk management becomes very important part of being a project manager's job role, a part of project management book of knowledge has addressed risk management practices. And not going too much in detail, but just trying to put a context here that those traditional risk management practices, or the PMBOK prescribed risk management practices, used to follow an order. They used to start with planning the risk management. So when you do a project management activity, when that project planning exercise starts, that's when the risk management and risk planning exercise also starts. It was very closely tied up to the project management and project initiation activities. Then you go about identifying the risks. So there used to be a lot of upfront planning discussions, brainstorming, understanding what could be the different types of risks. So underlying assumption is that you have a strong hold of what are the requirements you're going to be working on in this project. So having frozen requirements, you need to go about identifying the risk under those requirements when the solution will be developed, right? So with that kind of context, a lot of risk identification used to happen. And this, believe me, I've been a project manager in my past experience as well. I know this used to take a long time and a lot of time, right? There's a lot of investment which used to go in identifying the risk as well. And then two-step process to put these identified risks through. One, a qualitative risk analysis, where you used to identify, once you have identified the risk, you need to go about categorizing them into proper buckets, right? Different types of risk, and they would probably need a different ways to handle it or mitigate it depending on their categorization. Once you've done the categorization of risk, then you used to go into performing quantitative risk analysis, which is understanding the risk impact. So given the probability of that risk being realized and the overall impact it would have, you need to do all this quantitative risk analysis. Yeah, and then once you have gone through this, then you go about planning the risk responses. So now we have a better handle of what are the different types of risks in the project, and what are the different severity of risk based on the impact analysis which you have done in the quantitative risk analysis. Then depending on that, you'll go about doing the risk response planning. Yeah, so different types of risk, different severity could need different type of responses. And then last but not the least, then you go about implementing the risk responses, and thereafter throughout. So implementing risk responses typically used to be putting them, that mitigation plan, into the project plan. There used to be long project plans, and then you need to add, okay, for this kind of risk being materialized, this is how we're going to handle that in the project plan. Maybe at this milestone or this phase, these are the activities we're going to handle to take care of this kind of risk. Yeah, and then throughout you're doing monitoring of risk. So one important point to call out here is there's a lot of upfront planning and deliberation required in this process. And having experienced it, I can vouch for it. This is how it used to be. A lot of investment in terms of effort and time. Yeah, and monitoring the risk, of course, was a process which used to go on and on throughout the project life cycle. Yeah. So this is our best understanding of the traditional risk management, or the risk management under the umbrella of PMBOK. Now let's understand, coming to more closer to the cusp of the topic of this session, how organizations are operating in VUCA world. So VUCA is obviously an abbreviation, as Prashant mentioned. So I like your attention to watch just a 2.5 minutes of very profound video, which will summarize this and will set the context for our session thereafter. Yeah. So I'm just putting this YouTube video, and everyone can always refer this when you need to as well. Yeah. Just be with me for these 2.5 minutes. Okay, hopefully you guys have watched the video. The audio was just music, by the way, so everything what was relevant in the video has been put on the captions.
Yes, we could see the video.
Yeah, okay, apologies if audio was not audible, but that was just background music, guys. So looking at the video, I'm sure you would have found how profound, you would have felt how profound the VUCA world changes are, and how it has kicked out a lot of Fortune organizations. If you recollect, one of the information being shared on this video is since 1925, most of the Fortune organizations, which used to be the leaders across the globe, more than half of them are no longer there in the latest Fortune list, right? So, what are the reasons? So, reasons are in this underlying complexities of the VUCA world, right? So, we would like to have a little bit of our own brainstorming in terms of understanding what we believe could have been the other reason. So we understand the VUCA is the underlying reason. What is it that particular aspect of VUCA is something which has caused them to go out of business? And let's take some examples, like some of the organizations we know of, some of the companies we know of. I've just put up their example. There are numerous out in the industry, but those which have been a market leader, like Nokia, BlackBerry, Kodak, Xerox, if you can relate to them, those which have been market leader at some point in time. We're not even talking about those organizations which have gone out of business if they were not dominant, but these are the organizations have been dominant at one point in time, but little later they started losing their business big time, and then they've simply gone out of business, yeah, eventually. So this is quick for everyone to have a pulse check. What do you believe that has been the key reasons for Nokia, BlackBerry, Kodak, or Xerox failure? I just need to understand what the audience believe here. So to be able to participate in this and have your inputs, please, if you can go to this site, menti.com, www.menti.com, you can see these instructions on the top of this slide, and enter the code as it is 9397396 so that way you will be able to participate in this little bit of survey. We want to understand how our audience believe has been the key reasons for these organizations failure. Think about any one organization, if not all, right? So Nokia might be a very good example, because we all would have started using Nokia phones at some other point in time, and how it has lost its market dominance. Or you could pick up any of those other organizations. Yeah. Thanks for putting in your inputs. We can see some results coming in. Yeah, so this as mentioned, this is not an exhaustive list. So it is just an indicator what you believe could have been the primary reason. And of course, we understand there's not one reason for any big organization's failure. It's generally a combination of multiple reasons coming together. However, let's think about what we believe is the primary reason out of these. Yeah, so one is, you can see, poor management. Another could be complacency. Another could be competition. And then yet another is missing customer connect or technical incompetence. Yeah, so let's say what we believe. Great, you can see a lot of inputs coming up, and you guys can see the results on the screen as well. Okay, so if we take a look at this, what our audience believe, complacency along with missing customer connect and technical incompetence, we believe are the primary reasons. So some have voted for competition, but it's 18%, so 27%. So pretty much almost equal number of voting across our audience for complacency as the key reason, or missing customer connect as the key reason, or technical incompetence as the key reason. Great, thanks for all of your input, guys. If we go to the next one, please, I'll just request you to think about what you believe could have been done to avoid their failure. It's just a simple free flow tax, anyone who can add it up. So we understand some reasons for their failure. what could have been done to avoid those failures? I mean, just simple one-liner statement will suffice here, if you can. Anyone? Okay, we are seeing some good responses coming in. Adopt, beyond listen and watch, adapt to change, customer focus, innovation, competitive. Great. Awesome. Lot of great inputs have already come in. So, okay, and the count is growing. Thanks, guys. Risk management. Yeah, someone has added up risk management. So, competitor analysis, beyond listen and watch, more customer centricity, look inwards. Yeah, adapting to change. Yeah, more customer centricity. Yeah, continuous innovation, new product strategy. Wow, very interesting inputs, guys. Thanks all of you for sharing. I believe you guys are done, or if anyone adding any comments still. Okay, missing purpose and objective. Yeah, very important. Great. Understanding end user. Yeah, yeah. Okay, great, guys. Thanks for putting in a lot of inputs. Let's take it from here. I think we had a very good thought process aligned with this audience. A lot of very important points have been already highlighted by the audience. Look inwards, yeah. Market analysis, yeah, of course. Unrisk forecasting, partial analysis, very interesting. Great, guys. Thank you. For sake of time, I'll just stop it here. Let's go back to our presentation and we'll build on our storyline. Okay, so this, as we believe, we have already brainstormed, and thanks for all of you. A lot of key reasons for their failure you have already thought through. Yeah, some of the other ones I put it on slide again, not exhaustive list, guys. As I mentioned, any big organization failure could not probably be attributed to one reason or other. There would always be multiple reasons, but the common pattern which we can talk about is delayed response to major competitor threats. Maybe they realize that there are competitors. So Nokia has been the market leader in in the mobile space. They've been simply ruling it across the globe in early 2000, 1990s, late 1990s and 2000. And it's not that they haven't moved from feature phone to a smartphone. They did make the move, but there have been some various important common patterns that they made the move little late. They did the acquisition of Symbian to come up with the platform, the operating system platform, which will enable them to work in a smartphone and maybe potentially deal with the competitive threat coming from likes of Apple. Yeah, so Apple introduced their smartphones around the same timeline. However, failure to identify risk under uncertainty. So they didn't realize that the risk would be that high that it would probably kick them out of business in next few years if they don't, acted very seriously. So reactive rather than proactive approach. They realize, but maybe they realize a bit late. An inability to gauge the fast changing customer preferences. And thanks to many of you, you guys have already nailed it. Yeah. So these are some of the key reasons. And complacency, again, you guys have already nailed it. Yeah, technical incompetence. So let's come to the focus of the session here, that we believe that traditional risk management practices are not adequate. So none of those organizations listed on the previous slide, it wasn't the case that they didn't had risk management practices in place. They all were big organizations. They had their enterprise risk management and a lot of project and program management activities in place. However, still they went through those challenges and they ran out of business. So the answer to our question, which we have already brainstormed, lies in the uncertainty brought in by the VUCA world, right? So we've just seen that in the video, the volatility, the uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. I'm not going into the details, we have already discussed it, but that kind of uncertainty and the complexity which VUCA world brings in has actually been the game changer for most of these organizations and continues to be the game changer. So thanks to Dave Snowden's, this is his Cenavin framework. It's pronounced very differently, so it's also pronounced like Canavin framework. Actually, that's the right pronunciation, but in general, we call it as Cenavin also. So whatever you want to call it as. So Dave Snowden has put it up very nicely that it has been easy to deal with the simple or simple complexities where it was easy to establish the cause and effect, right? So in the VUCA world, the organizations, if they are dealing in scenarios which are simple, where easy cause and effect can be established, that's the simplest. But that has been changing, so that is hardly to be found in the VUCA world. From simple, you get something like complicated, where there is a establishment, a step, cause and effect established, but it could be multiple layers of cause and effect. Yeah, so you may have to uncover. However, most of the organizations keeps operating in complex world, so we're not going to talk about the chaotic uh, the domain of operation, but complex is where we see most of them, where it's not easy to establish a cause and effect. So it takes a lot of efforts to understand, and there could be multiple levels of cause and effect which may be prevalent. So there are multiple system parameters which are interlinked to each other, and then they need to be understood in entirety. Applying systems thinking, then only you can understand the complexities, right? And Stacy's complexity matrix also mentions that most of the organizations operate under this complex. So it depends on which way you look at it, either leveraging Canavin framework, Davis Snowden's, or Stacy's complexity matrix. It's coming out very clearly that most of the organizations in the VUCA world operate under complex domain. So that's what makes it very hard for them to understand what's changing, because both the problem problem domain as well as the solution domain is fast changing, and there's a lot of uncertainties. So some of the common challenges which we can pinpoint here, which makes even the risk management extremely difficult, if not impossible, and this complex operating environment, is that it's hard to establish the cause and effect, because there's multiple parameters interlinked to each other, and elaborative upfront risk management, which has been a time and tested proven technique, is not available or cannot be applied as it is, because the underlying assumption of elaborative risk management is that you know the problem domain, you have formed up on the requirement, then you have created a project plan, then you can do a lot of upfront planning. But that's not how you operate in a VUCA world. You cannot fixate the requirements. Everything is fast changing, right? So that doesn't work as it is. Then increasing risk of missing business value generation or even tried and tested technology. So before VUCA world started, the technology has been changing for a while, but it still used to give a span of time where you can try and test and technology, and then you know the patterns to apply it. Now the technology landscape is changing so fast that you do not have that luxury of always applying the tried and tested technology. You have to often get into uncharted territories. So let's take example of 5G or the IoT devices trying to talk to each other. So there's a lot of unknowns, and that's what is the underlying premise of dealing in or operating in VUCA world, that you have to keep dealing with more and more number of unknowns. So known knowns are okay, that was the simple domain, but known unknowns and even unknown unknowns are the trend now. Yeah, so that's where the traditional risk management practices are not all up to date or not adequate to apply, right? So what are those new risk management practices? We have seen some of the successful fortune organizations which have started adopting and applying those practices successfully. Yeah, so what I've tried to do is, again, not a comprehensive list, guys, but because we are here in the Agile Network India, we have an aspiration to learn and understand about agile ways of working. Yeah, so we are trying to relate an experience sharing here, that how organizations dealing with VUCA world complexities, trying to leverage various agile practices, have been able to better perform risk management. Yeah, so I've just tried to highlight this. So one, if you start with traditionally, if you see on the left of the screen, big upfront risk planning and relying on historical risk database. Remember, so even that PMBOK driven risk management, they also used to extensively highlight that you need to also leverage on the past risk database. But because the underlying domain is fast changing now, that's not adequate anymore. So what is the new way forward? We are seeing organizations doing ongoing risk planning rather than one point upfront risk planning. It's an ongoing risk planning, right, which is happening and which is done across various agile events and ceremonies, and leveraging sophisticated AI analytics also to generate risk foresight. So it's not only risk planning which is happening continuously. So you can take example of any agile event, even simple like agile Scrum teams doing their own uh, Scrum planning events as well as the daily stand-ups. They do review what are the blockers, what are the challenges we have, right, and then they keep reviewing or touch basing on these challenges on a daily basis. So it's an ongoing activity rather than a one point activity, right? Then next coming to is aligned to waterfall based project plans. We've seen the traditional risk management practices used to be closely aligned to waterfall based risk, the project plans, risk plans which are tied up to project plans. However, the new trend emerging is that they should be aligned to value streams and track through the short time events and cadence and objective milestones, right? So that provides with the objective way to measure the success rather than the the fixated or phase wise approach which was planned out in the traditional project plan. Yeah. Then we see another change, that centralized risk management function which used to be there and typically under the umbrella of PMO, project management office, used to be centrally controlling the entire risk management activity. The trend is that now risk management is better done in a distributed and decentralized way. Yeah, not one body or one group of experts only. They may still have those roles, people may be multi-hatting it, but what works better on the ground is everyone contributes and participates in the risk management. Everyone puts their skin in the game. So everyone is responsible for identifying the risk as well as even managing the risk together. There may be few management or stakeholders leadership who may be accountable for it, but everyone becomes responsible here in as a new trend. Yeah. And then risk management specialists used to own and manage the risk, right? Traditionally project management and program management professionals. Again, as I mentioned, this becomes now collaborative. This becomes everyone's responsibility. And how it is being done, there are good examples. Teams have been practicing already in the VUCA world. Those who are relatively more successful in adapting to the VUCA world, they're doing collaborative big room planning. So a good example is um, something which is called as PI planning, programming ingredient planning, as prescribed under Scaled Agile framework. But those similar kind of practices generally are called as big room planning, where team who's going to work on the solution, they come together, they brainstorm together, and they identify all the risk together. Not only they identify the risk, they also collectively contribute to the risk mitigation approaches, and they even get a vote to confirm whether they are happy with the risk mitigation or not, right? So that's the change, the paradigm shift we are seeing. Everyone comes together to contribute, and then the focus from output and activity is changing. So traditionally output and activity used to be the focus. With that is how project plans were elaborated, even work breakdown structure and all, extensively output and activity focus. That is changing to outcome driven risk management focus. So you need to understand there are different types of risk, and because we have seen organizations unfortunately going out of business, so that means some of the risks either were not identified or were not adequately addressed. So what you need to understand is there will always be a number of different types of risk in any organization. What's the most important? You need to first have a strong handle on risk which would have a direct outcome on your and business objective of the organization. So a new thought process needs to be applied, that you need to start tying up risk to the business value, your business and customer outcomes, and OKRs, which is objectives and key results. And that is a trend we are seeing. It's an interesting new trend, but we're seeing with the decent success rates. Yeah. And then traditional rent management tools were used to be in play. That is again changing to leveraging ALM tools where risks are transparently managed across the board. So anyone, as I mentioned, anyone can raise the risk, but it could be available for everyone's review, and especially the rolled up dashboards up to the leadership and those who are accountable for risk. They would have an integrated, seamlessly integrated view of all the kind of risk along with their impact tied up to the outcomes, the business outcomes. Yeah, so they will understand at any point in time what could be the changing dynamics of different risks and what could be the potential outcomes to their business. Yeah, I'm just continuing further. This is again not an exhaustive list. Some of the key changes which we have encountered in our experience. Big bulk requirements used to be there, right? So big requirement documents and then requirement traceability metrics under RAID log. That is giving way to to different new practices. So because you don't have all the requirements at one go, the way product companies, innovating product companies are operating is they're trying to minimize those requirement related risks with faster feedback loops. This concept of MVP products. So rather than having entire product going through the traditional project centric ways of development, you create MVPs, minimal viable products, and then not only that, you also put them through faster feedback cycle. A product hypothesis or something which Eric Ries has pioneered in Lean Startup, you put them in through faster feedback cycle. You validate whether this product is worth investing full money and time in the entire life cycle duration. So you understand that early, so you are minimizing the risk of your investment. Yeah, so you run faster feedback cycle and you understand whether it is worth investing or not. You'll get the crucial feedback sooner than later, and then applying design thinking practices, because many of you also captured in our polling that some of the reasons the organizations would have failed is because they didn't had a customer connect. They lost the pulse of customer, right? So customer might be interested in a smartphone, but Nokia lost it, or maybe customers were willing to understand or experiment with touch screen. Nokia thought, no, we are great without touch screen as a functionality. So that was a disconnect between customers. So applying design thinking practices, understanding customers is again a way to reduce those risks at organization level. Yeah, and then regulatory and compliance domain. Again, I'm gonna do a quick experience sharing around this. Regulatory and compliance domain risk are managed. Uh, so regulatory and compliance domain risks are managed by means of implementing various controls and audits. This has been the traditional trend. It's not that it is changing totally. You still need controls and you still need organizations, different groups who do the audit, but you cannot just rely solely on these mechanisms in place to handle risk in this kind of regulatory and compliance industry. Good examples are banking industry, energy and utilities, insurance industry. They're heavily regulated industry, right? And they have to comply with a lot of standards and norms, right? So how do you handle risk effectively in this? So they are typically, so one new pattern we have seen is successful pattern, that those regulatory and compliance risks are also identified, and they all those kind of compliance requirements are added up into the product backlog, because most of these organizations are working in agile. So everything gets funneled through product backlog. All kind of work comes through product backlog. Even the compliance and regulatory requirements are funneled through product backlog, so the team addresses them at the right time, earlier than later, sooner than later, right? Rather than putting those kind of compliance checks towards end of the product development or project development cycle. Yeah, and then another example is there used to be formal RAID reviews, risk assumptions, issues, dependencies. This has been an established practice that is still in place. However, the way it is used to be run is changing. Ways, even those practicing daily stand-ups, that is an opportunity. They look at whether there is any new impediment. Is something going to block your work? You are not waiting till end or once you develop the product to understand that it's going to hamper you, but while you're developing, you're trying to understand if it's going to hamper any of your activities, and you're raising it right there and then and there itself. Yeah. So another example is whole rate reviewed every time with the high maintenance overhead. However, in the new ways of working, we are seeing that it is being reviewed individually at each point of contact. You don't have to really wait for the cadence. Either you used to be monthly rate reviews, or I even know of organizations which used to do quarterly rate reviews. That's too late for us to get a hang in the fast changing dynamic VUCA world, right? So you need to ingrain those practices in different ways and distribute it across different ceremonies, agile ceremonies. And then extensive upfront mitigation planning. So not only that risk identification used to be done upfront, but even risk mitigation used to be done upfront in the traditional ways. So that needs to be now synced up with product lifecycle events throughout the life cycle of the product, right? So you cannot just do it upfront at one go and then assume that it's going to work, because things are changing fast. It might have changed since the time you have last visited. So you need to keep doing this on an ongoing basis. And then PM and PGM manages risk in RAID log and publishes record. So we are seeing that this is also changing, that not only the RAID logs are changing, but there is a concept which a lot of especially the Scrum teams have been able to experiment and adopt, is they manage their own risk burndown. Not only that, risk and issues and dependencies are raised and tracked in the team, and leveraging ALM tools, it's very much possible at ease. They also can generate, and they do generate risk burndown. So every iteration, every sprint, they can see how those risks which have been identified are coming down, and there could be new risks being added any day. But then, because it is all tool driven and tool control, it dynamically updates, and then it shows you the latest risk burnout at any point in time, rather than relying on those traditional processes. So what are the key benefits? So again, not an exhaustive list, but some of the key benefits which we can see summarizing out of these new age risk management practices are: one, that we see that this also helps with the culture shift from organizations which have been more used to do risk management in a reactive mode. They have done upfront planning, but once risk will materialize, then they'll do the mitigation and all. But it changes in the mindset from being reactive to proactive as organization practices, the new age risk management. Yeah. And the proactive or ongoing risk management also helps identifying the opportunities. So not all risks are bad. That's another important element to call out. The successful organizations, we have seen that if you realize, if you identify a risk timely, there could be a competitive threat, or there could be a risk to new changing technologies. Again, I'll go back to the same example. Maybe organizations operating in this VUCA world, everyone is leveraging internet in one or other way, right? So the changes which could be brought in by 5G, for example, it could be a threat for your business, or it could be an opportunity. You can identify it as a risk because you don't know how it might change. There are a lot of uncertainties, a lot of unknowns in that premise. But if you try to handle it well, you can transform this risk into an opportunity which can help grow your business. Or it could be IoT, the Internet of Things, right? So you can have new ways of having different devices talk for the benefit of your business if you identify. So this whole change in mindset from being reactive to proactive, as well as looking at risk also as potential opportunities. Yeah, so that also comes handy with the adoption of these new techniques. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the lean startup approach, where you, rather than investing fully into big product ideas, big concepts, you may have to look into fast feedback cycles. Yeah, and that helps minimizing risk significantly. And a lot of organizations have been exhibiting, not only the startups, it's more easier for startups, but we know of very many large organizations also which are running this kind of fast feedback cycle, leveraging lean startup approach to minimize their risk. Yeah, and an ability of project to fail early. That is the benefit you gain, that you see that it can fail. If it has to fail, it should fail early, right? And inexpensively, rather than consuming all the resources and the money and the time investments, right? So these are some of the benefits of the risk management. Now, last but not the least, let me quickly, in next few minutes, let me do an experience sharing. Again, this is just based on my experience and some of the other industry thought leader colleagues which have been part of in some of the engagements which we have seen, right? So this is one of the financial global client where we have seen that before they got into this transformation journey, their previous risk management practices used to be pretty much dictated by the PMBOK approach, which we have seen earlier in the session, that there was a central risk management function. There's a controls framework, because they're in financial industry, they have to have controls framework. Their separate risk audit and compliance team, and then they also used to come and do the compliance and audit check, and even controls check towards later for each releases. So if there is a 6-month release, they will have to provision almost month's time towards end to meet all these compliance and audit requirements, right? That used to be the way they used to operate earlier. Then risk used to be tied up to project plan, then managed and reported across projects output milestones. So there was not enough visibility and transparency for everyone. So central risk management function used to own it and centrally control it, and they were manually reporting to a lot of stakeholders, leadership and all. But everyone else who is working on the team never had a full view of the risk and all, right? The changes I being part of one of the core team members, we tried to collaboratively introduce over a period of time is that change in adopting the decentralized and distributed risk management approach, aligning teams to value stream and establishing integrated risk management across value streams. Value stream alignment is very important because that helps keeping the teams focused to what actually matters to the end customer, right? And then outcome measurements defined and OKRs established for teams. So once you define outcome measurements for each value stream, the teams could be program level teams. There are different organization constructs across industry. So they're generally, if you're talking at a scale of 1,000+ people working together for building complex solutions, there will be a big scale coming into picture. You often have different layers, maybe portfolio layer, program layer, and the team layer, right? Whether you're implementing one or other of the industry frameworks, I'm not even talking about SAFe or other framework, but they're often different layers. So you tie up the outcome, the measurements at the value stream level, and then program layers also are aligned to those value stream outcomes, and the team layer, which is operating underneath the agile teams, the scrum teams or Kanban teams, they also tie up to the same objective by signing up to objectives and key results, which roll up to the same overall value stream objective, right? So as I mentioned earlier, that helps reducing the risk, and you understand what will be the impact on your end outcome, the customer commitments, the customer outcomes. Yeah, if you tie up all the risk. And leveraging the ALM tools extensively, that is very important, because you can't keep doing all this manually. You have to leverage the tools, the ecosystem. So multiple ALM tools talking and coordinating, integrated to each other, had provided an ecosystem where you have a seamless tracking and reporting or dashboarding of risk across all those levels of the organization. I'm talking about generally 3 levels: the value stream level, the program level, and the team level, but all that tied up leveraging those integrated ALM tools, right? So the benefits, we can already see it's still a journey. They're still on journey. It's going to be a journey, but a decent benefit you shall already start seeing is that it has started improving risk transparency and visibility across the stakeholders. Yeah, everyone gets to know, especially the leadership and all, have a consolidated view of all the risk. At any point in time, it is up to date. It is not generated as a report one point in time, or a monthly report or weekly report. Any point in time, it is latest, up to date. And then integrated risk dashboards which are available, and lightweight compliance and controls, right? So it has reduced the overhead of doing manual controls and checking. Yeah. So last but not the least, key takeaways from this session: collaborative distributed risk management is the thing, has to be extensively explored, adopted. Yeah, new risk management mindset and culture is important. You can't keep looking at risk as something which will always cause trouble. It might have opportunities to look at. And then outcome focused risk management, you have to really be thinking about the outcomes which are tied up to the value streams. Yeah, and effectively leveraging the ALM tools and DevOps telemetry. As I mentioned, there is a DevOps telemetry. We are seeing some sophisticated clients even leveraging to provide risk insights, potentially what could go wrong in future, right? So that's the kind of even predictive AI analytics, which gives them foresights into the potential future risk. So I'll take a pause here. This kind of concludes the session so far, which I planned off, and I'll happy to take up the questions from here.
Thank you, Ashwini. A very informative session. Lots of learnings and takeaways. I see one question coming up right now. Do you have any example for outcome focused risk management?
Yes, so we have example of outcome focused risk management where if I take one example, we had been part of the lending value stream, right? So in lending value stream, their outcome was to grow their footprint, the business footprint in one particular market area by 20%. So they've set up those specific outcome that in another 1 year, we're going to increase our footprint by 20%, right? So to increase their footprint by 20%, that's the overall value stream objective of the lending. They had come up with some specific OKRs underneath, which will help them come closer to it, right? Some of them is to leverage the new DevOps infrastructure, which will help them with the faster turnaround time and faster delivery cycles, right? So there will be various different of those kind of OKRs which they had to come out catering to that objective. The way risk has been identified is that, for example, let me pick up some specific risk example. I think that's a question that one of the risk was related to their cloud environment. So they have been leveraging one particular cloud environment for their mobile development because the lending market, the customers are fast leveraging mobile as the primary channel of interaction with the business, right? So rather than only relying on this web-based and the in-branch channels, the mobile channels have to be extensively leveraged and applied. And they had challenges identified, the risk identified in terms of leveraging that mobile development channel, which was being set up, established over one cloud platform. So that risk was identified. That risk was handled effectively with these all ALM tools coming into picture, that you can move from one cloud platform to another cloud platform. We help bring them into a plan where they were able to establish plan B and plan C to shift and leverage another cloud platforms, right? And that kind of agreement was taken up, and that risk actually materialized that they had a lot of roadblocks in terms of generating the required mobile features, leveraging particular cloud platform A, and then they had to fall back and start leveraging cloud platform B. Sorry, I'm not taking the specifics here, but just to give a high level indicator. So that kind of help them understand the impact of the risk. If you won't have identified or managed it, it could have an impact that you may have missed out on entire mobile customer base to be able to leverage your functionality. And it is a competitive market. The market I'm talking about is European market they're operating in, and they would have lost out to their competitors if they won't have acted fast in handling this risk which was identified.
So thank you, Ashwini, once again for your time and sharing your experience insights. Definitely learning for us, and would like to collaborate with you once again in the future for our initiatives. Thank you, Agile Network India. Thank you for the same. Thank you, everyone on the call.